Thank you all for taking the time to come and join us today. It's amazing to see everybody face to face. I've done one of these in a while, so it's great to actually shake hands or rub elbows, whatever it is that we do nowadays. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rod Lazarus. I'm the head of cybersecurity for Ingram Micro, and I'm here to sort of work with the Cisco and IBM to talk through one of the solutions we've got. So I've been in cybersecurity for a few decades now. Seen some changes along that road. When we first started, I think one of the major things we wanted to do was go and make sure that we took the welcome message off the Cisco route on our borders. And then sort of, we got to building firewalls. We started to build great shopping firewalls on the outside of companies, and as sort of security professionals, we went down and went, we should probably do a little bit more than that. So we started to put firewalls in front of critical business applications. We started to put it in other sort of environments as well. And then we sort of had the introduction of cloud. And it's like, okay, there's something new, security guys. All of a sudden that we had to protect networks that weren't even on our network. And then we had COVID, and that just kicked everybody out. So all of a sudden the security landscape that we were protecting was dramatically different than when we sort of started. But looking at all of that, there's a few fundamental things that have not changed since I started, and that is, there's a couple of things in security that you need to know. One of them is you need to understand what you've got on your network, and you need to understand what it's doing. And if you've got that, then you've got a chance to protect your networks. So what we've got here today is that through Cisco and Ingram and IBM, is we've put together a solution that I think will help us do that. It'll give us the visibility across the networks that you need. It'll be able to provide actionable intelligence as well, so the security professionals can make the decisions they need to make to protect their networks. So I'm going to hand over to Chris Hawkins in a moment to talk through the IBM side of it. And normally I sort of go through what sort of role does and what Chris has managed to do in his career in cybersecurity. But then I think we'll be here all day. So what I'll do is I'll hand over to Chris now, a true pioneer in cybersecurity, to take us through.
Thanks, Rod. And it hasn't been that much more than everyone else has done, probably, but I've been lucky. We're using the clicker, the green, so it's right-hand arrow to go in. Yeah, so I've been lucky enough to actually have been in a successful startup way back in the 90s, and Greg Clark, who was the CEO of Symantec, was our CEO at the time, so he went all the way. At the time we were doing, network analytics, we were doing access management, identity, encryption, all in South East Queensland, exporting to the global market, and we still do that today. So I actually live at Burleigh, where if you guys are in Sydney and Melbourne, you're probably all trying to buy real estate in my neighbourhood. So either thanks for that or welcome to the neighbourhood. But COVID has really driven, like you say, Rod, everyone to be everywhere, accessing everything. So I lead kind of the technology side of IBM security. In Australia, we're about 150 people across, 150 plus the lab. There's about 80 people building products, exporting globally. Technical, a software team, and if you look at IBM, it's all about tech now and driving that through ecosystem and partners at scale to address the hybrid multi-cloud problem, right? And we also have a managed security team, which really looks at how to address this problem at scale at the big end of town. So, I guess this problem, next slide, Grant. This problem requires us to collaborate. Whether it's IBM or Cisco or Splunk or McAfee or whoever or whatever it is, so a bit of an agenda. So we're hoping to have lunch at about 1, and some Q&A just before that. This isn't about just one tool to solve one problem, across all of your ecosystem. It actually requires us, and I think about some of the major threats that happen globally. mostly in wartime, the governments get together and they're able to help defend against attacks from adversaries, right? The fact is that major IT firms have a lot of the intel in order to help to understand what the actual threat intelligence is right now for you, right? So that's where, you know, Cisco, IBM, other partners, when something goes bad, we actually get together and try to collaborate to send to you information that you can use to defend yourself, right? So there's this open approach to sharing of threat intelligence that underpins Cisco IBM partnership with Cisco Telus, IBM X-Force, and then down, you know, into the layers, whether it's network, and Rod expressed that in terms of the network, but we'll also say things like, your network may not be yours anymore, you have got data everywhere else, you've got access and identity everywhere. So how do you bring all of that together in an open platform approach or an open ecosystem so that you can understand what's happening in the network? So next slide, will I try? So, you know, if I look at what you're trying to balance, right? If you're delivering solutions yourself as an infrastructure provider, or you're a customer consuming it, there's a lot of competing forces. Cloud, you know, all the cloud vendors will be coming on saying, well, we do security. Well, yes, you do security, you can do it for yourself well, but, you know, that doesn't solve the whole problem. Everyone's rolling applications and infrastructure platforms out to these cloud providers. The threats are real. You know, we see those from a day-to-day basis. You can look online every day and you see attacks that are happening to anyone, right? And whether it's 9 or parliamentary services, it's very difficult to defend against these attacks, right? So we're seeing the advanced threats becoming, you know, just continuing to grow because they have access to innovation platforms in cloud that they can use against us at scale, very cheap. And so that'll just continue. The government has got involved in driving legislative compliance requirements because really you can't innovate your way out of security. We've tried to do that for 2 decades. That means that legislation is required in order to raise the bar and make sure that consistently everyone can apply a common set of practices so that we all rise together, because it's no good that, you know, Jay is secure and I'm not, because my systems will then attack yours. So we have to actually raise the bar consistently. So critical infrastructure bills, privacy acts, encryption laws, all sorts of legislation are now coming through the government. And then you've got this problem's getting more diverse, distributed. So IoT, edge, you know, this whole decentralized approach to running compute is here. And that's where Kubernetes and our, you know, like if you look at IBM's acquisition of Red Hat, it's a platform. We want to use that to go across hybrid multi-cloud everywhere to understand where your security problems are, right? But if I look at, we've got a bunch of different reports. There's probably 2 that I'd recommend. One is the X-Force Threat Intelligence Reports, which tells you what the threats were that we saw in the last 12 months. And the second one is the Cost of a Data Breach Report. And this report's actually taken from that Cost of a Data Breach Report. And I wanted to focus just on one area as part of this event today, and that is what I call situational awareness, what the government calls situational awareness. If you don't know what's happening in your network, then when you get breached or someone asks you and you don't have an answer, it's not a good position to be in, right? So some of the mandates around, if you look at Cyber Hub, for example, federal government building 4 of them for the whole of government. The objective is to understand what's happening inside of the applications, data, and networks that government runs, so that they can expose that and then use that to generate threat intelligence that can be shared. So in order to deliver situational awareness, you need to have analytics to understand what's running where and what's the context around that, right? So if you look at the green bars here, so cost of a data breach, 3.35 million. These are people's opinions. It's not based on data. X-Force Threat Intelligence Report is based on data, right? So this is people being interviewed to say, well, in Australia, how much it costs when you were breached. The green indicates how to reduce the cost of a data breach, the mechanisms you use, and many of them are really based on knowing what's happening in your environment, right? Situational awareness. And there's the red there indicates in situations when the cost increases. So you see IoT, compliance failure, third-party breach, you would have heard of all these before if you're in security. So if I look at situational awareness, it really comes down to a couple of different components. And Cisco, our partner, is going to talk about that in the context of their solutions. In the context of IBM, it's a security intelligence platform. It's a SIEM, and the objective of the SIEM, from our perspective, is to collect information, primarily from your working operational workloads, and perhaps bringing in cloud data, depending on the use cases, and to use that to understand what is happening in my environment so that I can detect anomalous behavior at scale. Right? So if something bad's happening, and that's where you hear things like user behavioral analytics, that's just a use case. Insider threat, that's just a use case. To understand what's happening inside of your environment requires full visibility. So it might be Cisco collecting all of their data and sharing it with us. It would be us collecting data from all of these different systems and network devices and whatever else at scale to understand what that is. Have rules that then that you develop, or in our case, they come with the platform that can be used. Keep flicking that. I don't know how I do that, but the rules that can be used to implement, to detect common anomalous behavior, and then how do you investigate that more efficiently? If you can detect anything that's happening in your network and respond to that as soon as possible, you reduce the cost of the data breach. Obviously, if you don't even know it's happening, and you get breached, you might be told by the press, right? So there's kind of a cost-benefit analysis that needs to be made in order to understand how much you invest in that problem. However, as a service provider, you will land in circumstances where you will need to deliver some kind of compliance statement, or you may need to provide situational awareness to clients that use services that you deliver for them. Now, today that's critical infrastructure. Tomorrow I expect it to be widespread across cloud and on-premise workloads. Because in order for you as a supplier to be providing that information as a third party, you're introducing risk into their environment. That's why you're filling out third-party risk compliance statements all the time, right? And then how do you automate the response? So there's this cycle of detection and response that over time we need to make as efficient as possible so that you can respond to incidents. Now, as part of that, top left I've got our security intelligence platform, that's QRadar. I'm going to talk about Cisco as one of the elements to the overall solution that we're proposing today. But most importantly, if you're running tech on-premise or in managed infrastructure, storage is very important, right? And not just storage, how much data you store, for what purpose and for how long, but how quickly can it respond to queries. Because at the end of the day, you can understand if you're collecting a lot of data and a lot of information in a short period of time, continuously, and you're needing to detect whether something that happened 3 months ago is associated with something that's happening now, because attackers often get in your networks and they wait. They get in, they wait, they trigger something, then 3 months later, something happens that's adjacent to that. If you don't have visibility and high performance data analysis at scale, then you're going to miss some of that activity, right? So one of the feedbacks we get from a lot of customers is how quickly your console will refresh and recycle and search for these types of anomalous behaviours at scale. Now, I'll leave this slide for you to have a look at after, but basically our SIEM can be run anywhere. One of the pieces that I wanted to highlight here on the right-hand side, and there's a bunch of use cases you can deliver on top. We have an open ecosystem approach. What that means is that we want to drive open standards and open source where possible. Our first incarnation of this about 5 years ago was to create this thing called an IBM Security App Exchange. What that means is that any partner of ours can build apps for our platform and deliver them and give them a view of their data that's collected by our QRadar system so that they can get the right context for their solution. Right, so Cisco, we're going to do a demonstration hopefully later with Brendan on that exchange. Right. So just in terms of deployment, our customers, we have customers obviously in large scale business. We also have ecosystem partners who can sell our solutions. There's ones that run managed services, managed SIEM, managed SOC using QRadar. There's a bunch of options you've got. You can use physical appliances or you can do on cloud. But you know, the most flexible way for kind of that mid-market approach is to run appliances, virtual, and with and you can then kind of you can virtualize you can make it multi-tenanted. You can then back it with all of the infrastructure and high performance that you need using IBM's flash system. We've got some partners that we use. And so what typically happens then is they become IBM partners. They're selling as an ecosystem partner. We get a proposal, we send it to an ecosystem partner, they get to sell directly to our clients. That's how we get scale out of some of this. And next slide. Might have done a lot in cyber, but I haven't fixed the presentation. There's a bunch of things that need to happen in the industry in open standards. One, which we all compete with every day, is your WebEx experience versus your Microsoft Teams experience. Wouldn't it be good if we had an open standard that all those tools use to interoperate, so I could use the Cisco WebEx client with the Microsoft Teams client for somebody else, and we could all collaborate with the tools that we want? So that's something that we need to address as an industry, not within security, but that's what open standards delivers, by the way. If anyone ever talks about open standards, what open standards delivers is the ability to integrate multiple products together without the vendors talking to each other. That's how we did Stix and Taxi, that's how we do SAML, that's how we're going to solve some of these major problems at scale, right? So it's about collaboration. And just from a storage perspective, before I hand over to Grant, performance really matters here. I can talk to you about SIEM and detection and situational awareness all day, but if when you deploy it and you architect and you need to scale it, if the system's not properly tuned, if it's not appropriately scaled, and it doesn't have the right hardware underpinning it, then you've got yourself an issue that you can't resolve easily at that time. So with that, I wanted to hand over to Grant. Grant and I have known each other for what, two decades now, so it's been about 20 years. First time we presented together, so congratulations.
And I have to apologise, I'm the one that kept upsetting his slides.
That's all right.
Presentation. Anyway, welcome everybody. I'm from the IBM storage team, and working on this solution, we decided to work together with all the parties, so the IBM, Cisco, and Ingram coming together. And on the IBM side, we thought it was important to put together infrastructure as well to support this software solution. Okay? And taking advantage of that, in February this year, we announced a product which has kind of changed the game for us slightly, right? And that's the Flash System 5200. So what we've done with this storage product is we've taken the best of our high-end enterprise products and we've made it available to entry-level storage as well. Okay, and the advantage is that it allows us to put together the same sort of functions and capabilities that we would for our high-end implementations and clients for entry level as well, which also includes entry-level price. Right, so we can scale it all the way down, right? So this is a big change. It means that opportunities that we saw in the past where the implementations were going to be hundreds of thousands are now down to a few 10,000 potentially, right? That's what we're talking about now. So, and in terms of the product itself, in terms of 5200, right? One of the major features of it is it can include our Flash Core modules. So these are flash drives that IBM manufactured ourselves. It's through all of our own internal R&D that we've put it together, and it's got a few unique components to it, right? One is that, if you look on the right-hand side of the slide, we have compression engines on every drive. So that can scale. That can scale beyond any point that you've seen in traditional implementations, right? For the same reason, we've got engines for encryption as well, right? So it scales all the way out without any performance impact. The other advantage is that we've been able to get 4 layers of flash together to get this super high density flash. But through our R&D, we've been able to do some pretty smart things that's allowed us to have the reliability to be even higher than what was previously available on the 3-layer architectures, right? And so what that means to us is that we have a flash core module at the moment which is at 38.4 terabytes, which is the largest in the market at the moment. And if you want to scale up that box, as it says there, in that single 1U box, we can scale that sucker up to 1.7 petabytes, right? Which is something that is new to the marketplace, but also at price points that actually makes it affordable. So it opens up opportunity around edge computing as well, and all sorts of other opportunities out there in the market in general. Now, included in the box, we also have our storage virtualization. And this virtualization actually has the capability of actually virtualizing non-IBM hardware as well. So if you want to virtualize to be able to migrate the data across, we can also do that as well. It's got auto tiering, so you don't have to have any sophisticated policies. It all uses AI to be able to work out where it should be. So if you've got different tiers, different performance levels of the storage, and this box handles the 4 different types of storage that we have available. So we've got the flash core modules, we've got storage class memory, we've got the traditional SSDs, and we've also got disk that we can support as well. So we can support all of them. If you want to create different tiers of that, the software within the virtualization of the 5200 is actually able to control that and move it around based on the requirements of the application itself. The other point is that we also can add drives into an existing RAID configuration without having to create a new RAID configuration. And as a result of that, you can start off small and you can grow over time. You can have 1 or 2 drives as you want to go. From an availability perspective, it's designed for 6 nines, but also because we support IBM Hyperswap between 2 machines, we can actually provide a guarantee of 100%. Okay, so I've got that capability as well. And then if you wanted to have options where you wanted to move data into the cloud and back and forwards, we can do that as well through Spectrum Virtualized for Cloud. Okay, so this product has all sorts of great functions with it. And from the performance point of view, as I mentioned before, if you compare it against the SAS, the serial attached SCSI-based drives versus our NVMe type drives, which are flash core modules, it's basically an 8-to-1 performance difference that we get out of the box. Okay, now what we've done is we've worked with Chris and the team to put together a couple of size solutions for initial packages, right? So I've got an entry-level storage component which has 6 flash core modules for 12 terabytes. And based on the numbers we've got down the bottom, it'll show you approximately that it will last you about 6 months or so, or 9 months, it depends on the activity. The amount of storage that you need is dependent on a couple of factors. One is the events and logs, the activity that is going on, because as Chris took you through, that we're basically getting the data from all of the activity in your systems out there, and we're pulling it together. And then how long do you want to keep it for? Now, obviously, the longer you keep it, it means that you can look back over longer periods of time.
Just to articulate that, Brent, EPS is events per second, so that would be data, log data. Historical, often. So flows is actually real-time network data. So that's the 2 elements. Is obviously if you're wanting to do threat detection across network boundaries, then you're looking at flows, or if you want to augment it with logs because it gives you a different view, then it's events, right? So it's a good team looks at both of those things together to try to work out where anomalous behaviour is detecting the threat. So that's kind of the difference in scale there around flows and events, just for you if you look at when you get this deck later.
And to give you an idea of pricing, right, in terms of a partner buy price, and that assuming a deal reg and that, entry level is probably looking just a little bit over 40,000. Okay, so we're not talking about huge amounts of money here to be able to put together infrastructure to support what we're talking about. And then last point is this box is good for all sorts of solutions out there, right? So it opens up opportunities for conversations potentially where you have specific needs around performance, availability, and cost is important, right? So if there is anything that comes up, please come and talk to me. I've also got about 5 or 6 other storage people in the room here as well at the same time, so I'll be happy to cover it. And with that, I'll say thank you, and I'll pass over to Anthony.
Thanks, Grant. Can everyone hear me? Okay, all good?
Yes.
Hi, my name's Anthony Miller. I'm a cyber partner specialist with Cisco. I've been with the organisation now for close on 17 years. So I've been working with this beast for a long time. You will hear a funny sound to my voice, and I just should let you know I've had so many COVID tests that I'm completely over it. Unfortunately, I ended up in hospital last year with some major surgery, ended up in ICU with a collapsed lung, and then I had to have my gallbladder removed. So I've had one of those years, so I'm really keen to get over last year. So welcome, thanks for hosting us from IBM perspective, and also from the Ingram Micro team. Thank you, so much, team. Let's get into this as to why we're here. What we're trying to do at Cisco is how do we simplify security? Because it's pretty complex, as you're all pretty aware. And organisations out there are absolutely struggling with security today. Not only that, you know, the way business is changing. If you think about what happened back in February last year, when suddenly 75,000 Cisco employees had to be working from home. Massive effort, massive issues, obviously, from a security perspective, access and everything else. So it certainly has changed. The other piece of the puzzle, though, is that here's some of the things that are happening now with our security team. So this move to digitalisation has absolutely been fast-tracked by COVID. You know, the number of devices that we now have. So most people at Cisco will have a smartphone, will have a laptop or a Mac, and a number of our millennials want to bring their own iPads and everything else to work today. So the sheer number now of devices that we have to secure is amazing. Add to that distributed workforces with lots of branches and everything else. And then if you start thinking about the security issues that our customers are facing today, is, you know, this has been really magnified now, is how can they, you know, obviously lots and lots of security products. You know, I hate to say, at RSA conference, any ideas of how many people were exhibiting at RSA last year? Any idea? Security vendors.
Not IBM.
No, correct. But, you know, but to give you an idea, it's 658 vendors, security vendors. And I've got some numbers around. There's something like 3,000 security vendors. So in the past, what's happened is, got a problem, let's throw another box at it. And we all know that you can keep on throwing technology, but unless if you're talking about people, processes, and technology, you know, you can't fix stupid with duct tape. And this is the real key issue, is that if you look at the recent mandatory breach report, something like 34% was human error. Oops, I sent the wrong file to the auto-populated name in email. So what we've got to start thinking about, and we talked about this earlier, is how do we build out automation? How do we quickly work out that something bad has happened on the network? How do we quickly remediate? And certainly, you know, Chris was talking about this earlier in terms of visibility, simplification, and automation. How do we quickly go from detection to response? And that's the critical piece. And that's where obviously IBM comes in as a very key partner with Cisco as well. And again, we're not making it any easier. And if I look at Cisco, we have something like 64, 65 security products. We're trying to simplify these, and my colleague Darren will talk you through a little bit about that process. Is how do we actually make it easier? Let's stop talking about a next-gen firewall. Let's just talk about a secure firewall. So these are some of the things we're starting to make changes as well too. And if you think about it, with all these different siloed solution sets, the other issue is nothing talks. And so you think about the number of screens and monitors and alerts that are going off, and we're now seeing cyber fatigue, where people just don't even know what's happening within the network. And again, a lot of CSOs are saying it's very difficult to orchestrate, and that's certainly one of the piece of the puzzle that we're trying to build. Any ideas of how long the average is today for an organisation to pick up that something bad is in the network? It's
161 days.
Come in?
161.
161, yep. It's coming down to about 100 days. If you liken that to someone being in your house for 100 days, can you imagine what information they can actually be stealing? So this is the key. At Cisco, we've got it down to less than 3.75 hours and we publish it. That's a day zero in terms of trying to work out what's going on. So again, we need obviously a multitude of vendors still. We aren't a single vendor that can handle it. And some of the numbers too. This I talked about time to detect, time to know. Industry average, 100 days today. It's a key performance indicator for NetOps, SecOps, etc. as well. 81% of partners are saying, the customers are saying that orchestration between products is very, very difficult as well. And obviously everyone's trying to automate as much as they can. And at Cisco, we've actually contributed to this issue as well. Because we kept on buying organisations like IBM as well too, and adding lots of more complexity as well along the way. So if you think about when we started back in 2007, we started acquiring organisations like Ironport, the email security moving through, we've got a plethora of products. Each of these products come with a completely different console look. And so the number one issue that our organisations, company partners and customers are saying to Cisco, please make it easier for us. How can you bring all of this information into a single console and help me automate and the ability to do orchestration? And that product is called SecureX. And that's what we're talking about here today. I'm going to talk about how SecureX integrates into QRadar. We've got lots of boxes. The difference is all these boxes now talk to each other. So this is the critical thing. They are now sharing telemetry and information. And the biggest one, which is the brains trust, is a research organisation called Talos. For once, it's not an acronym, which Cisco always has lots of acronyms. Talos was actually a Greek god that used to wander around the islands, the Greek islands, protecting the Greek islands, hence the name Talos. But again, tremendous amount of telemetry that is coming into here. When we first acquired OpenDNS, they were doing 70 billion lookups daily from DNS entries. We're now at 200 billion entries, lookups each day. So we're getting massive telemetry on known bad DNS. Our email security appliances, again, has a lot of information about email. Our endpoint product, which is now called Secure Endpoint, used to be called Advanced Malware Protection for endpoints, so we've simplified that down to a Secure Endpoint, is also now picking up lots and lots of telemetry. So the key here, we've got over 300 threat researchers within the business that is actually looking at what's going on. And this is SecureX. So I'm actually going to really stop after this slide and move on to introduce Darren. The reason being is that SecureX is a really interesting cloud-native solution. We don't charge for it. It comes with any Cisco security product. So the call out today is that if you have any customers running Cisco security products, have they switched on SecureX? There's the ability to add some services as well too in turning it on. We've got customers turning this on within 15 minutes and getting immediate benefits. So from this is the console which certainly Darren will show you today, which again is highly customizable. These all close off and everything else, but again, this shows you all the applications and things that you can integrate. We've got over 170 integrations pre-built already today, news feeds, etc. But this is the key piece here, which is the ribbon. This is the ability now to start doing active threat hunting. So instead of having to go off and look at different consoles, working what's going on, obviously logging back in, etc., it's all single sign-on as well too. So the ability now to go off and do threat hunting, and I think Derek is going to demonstrate Cisco threat response as well too. Very quickly. So without further ado, because I'm just going to bore you with more slides, I'm going to take you straight through to Darren. So I'd introduce Darren Min. Technical sales specialist, I think is your title these days.
Solution architect.
Solution
Sales
architect.
specialist.
Thanks, Darren.
Whatever.
I do like this that Darren's got on his PC, which I've just noticed. It says passwords are like underwear. Change them regularly, don't leave them on your desk, and don't loan them to anyone.
I wasn't sure if anyone should see that or not. Can we just go back? I do have to cover off a few things around the security technologies. We can go back. I've got it. We can go back. Got it. So 2 more, I think. Yeah. So I won't bore you with the agenda, but as Anthony discussed earlier or mentioned earlier, we've tried to simplify a lot of our technologies in name, right? So where we've got next-gen firewall, ASA, ASAV, FTDV, we've now just called things secure firewall. Our email platform, we've got 4 or 5 different products inside email, so now secure email. So we've tried to simplify things, and you may hear me fall back to some of the old names because I've been working with this for so long. This is just more of a positioning slide, so everyone starts to get comfortable with some of the terminology that we talk about. Our cloud security portfolio. I've listed some of them. There's a lot more. I've tried to stick with things that are more traditional cloud products, not virtualized instances in the cloud. Secure email, secure cloud mailbox, they fall under the same platform. Secure endpoint, which is the AMP for endpoint products. We've got Umbrella, Duo, or Secure Access by Duo. See, I've pulled it back already. Secure malware analytics, which was ThreatGrid. So lots of different cloud-based products. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm going to touch on a few, and then we're going to get into SecureX. So secure email. We've had this platform now for, God knows how many years since we acquired Ironport. It's been in the cloud for a long, long time. It's a market leader. And I don't want to talk too much about email, but what I want to mention is we've got a number of different technologies which we integrate into it for domain protection, advanced phishing protection, malware defense, which integrates with our sandbox. All the telemetry comes from Talos, which Anthony mentioned earlier. We've got a product now called security awareness training. So this is probably what I think is the most critical aspect. We can have all the technology in the world, but we're the weak point. We always will be the weak point. So if we can start educating our users, our staff around security practices, especially around email, which is a larger spectrum of attack, I think that technology itself is worth its weight in gold. The next one, a cloud secure mailbox. So I've put this one out on its own because it's a recent product that Cisco has built that integrates into Office 365 without having to change and modify mail records coming in. So integrates into the Office 365 via APIs. It looks at the mail as it's already come into Office 365, examines it through our security engines, all the metadata and information stays within the Azure tenant, so it doesn't actually leave, and it provides you reporting based on what Cisco security technology sees. So it's a really, really powerful tool set. Doesn't have to change the way your mail flow works, but it gives you a lot of intelligence. Secure endpoint. Won't spend too much time on this one, but this is our EDR platform for the endpoint. Runs across Mac, Windows, iOS, Android, and various Linux flavors. Comes in 3 different feature sets, but predominantly you're looking at your traditional EDR endpoint detection and response. In our top tier, we have integrations with our threat hunting services with Talos. So in that service, what they will do is identify strange or odd indicators and behaviors and come back and generate reporting back to you inside the endpoint console. And then you can take that information and do what you need to do with it. So that's a really powerful piece. Another one is Orbital, which is an advanced search feature into the endpoint. So if anyone's dealt with something called OS Query, basically that platform allows you to take queries or make queries into the endpoint to pull back telemetry information, especially in forensic hunt. Secure access by Duo. People talk about 2FA a lot. This goes well and truly over and above 2FA. So this helps us posture and assess devices and users as they come onto the network to make sure that their devices and their applications are secure. It integrates with our secure endpoint platform as well. So if we start to see vulnerabilities within applications that the users are authorized to, they'll send information back to Duo and it will start to assess the end user again. And if they fail that assessment, they'll be disconnected from accessing that application. So that's how we're starting to do some of our integrations. It also gives the administrators visibility into the health of these devices. So you can start creating rules and policy around allowing users onto the network based around the health of their device, whether it's up to date, whether it's running the right firmware version, whether it's integrated with the right endpoint protection. So there's lots of those policy-driven controls built into this platform. So that's why we say it's more than just 2FA. Yes, you can get an access code and plug it into a platform, but it's more than that. Umbrella. So this is our Swiss Army knife for cloud security. It's got so many different technologies into it. DNS layer security, which came as the Open DNS acquisition. Secure Web Gateway, which is our cloud proxy. Cloud delivered firewall, so layer 3, 4, and now 7. Integrations with our cloud access security broker, CloudLock, which is a technology I didn't even have up there. Threat intelligence from Talos, and we've just recently released 3 new capabilities. So remote browser isolation, data loss prevention, and cloud malware detection. The last one's pretty interesting. It looks at data at rest sitting inside your cloud services like Box or Google Drive or others. It's also key integration point into our SD-WAN platform, so bringing the network to the cloud in terms of security, and that's where I want to talk about SASE. So our security access or secure access services edge, big buzzword, but this is where we're putting a lot of investment into our cloud security focus around bringing the edge of the network into the cloud securely and being able to automate it. Anthony's touched on this slide around SecureX, and I think what I want to do now is flip across to a demo, and hopefully it works. I just wanted to touch on also, we integrate very, very well with many different vendors through SecureX. Right. So let me introduce this to SecureX. This is the dashboard. So what we're seeing here on this dashboard is an API integration into the Cisco security toolset. So today, SecureX pulls telemetry from pretty much all of our security technologies, bar a few, and allows you to go and create these customized dashboards to present and show information as you and your security operations see fit. I've played around with a few, and I've got our ThreatGrid integration, which is our secure malware analytics. So what we do in ThreatGrid is analyze files. So that's our cloud sandbox. Intelligence from AMP, I've got a bunch here, but I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But this is the view that most SOC analysts will have a look at to get that instant information. We integrate with, like I said, our Cisco technologies. I've got integration with IBM+, which I'll show, and Cisco hosts these relays for us now, so it makes life easier to get into the platform. And then we've got a bunch of other available integrations, and the list goes on and on and on. And if it's not here, you can create your own through serverless relays and API integrations. I won't touch on orchestration because that'll take too long. What I want to do now is flip it across to IBM QRadar. So what I've done is I've set up an integration between IBM QRadar and Cisco SecureX, as well as I've also run a few of the apps from the app exchange for Cisco. So while I haven't customized the screen too much, what I've done is just shown the logs that are coming from Cisco Umbrella. And what it allows us to do is, if the demo guides work, you can highlight over an indicator like an IP address or a hash value, and it's not working. What it will do, it will pull information from the SecureX APIs to enrich that with our intelligence information. What we can also then do is right-click on that indicator and have a look at the integrations that we've got with Cisco. So these are through those apps that I spoke about before. So we can have a look at that in ThreatGrid, which is our sandbox. We can send it across to Cisco Investigate, which is part of the Umbrella platform, to look at domain and URL information, or we can investigate in SecureX. So what this should do is launch Cisco SecureX threat response. And what this does is it takes that indicator and analyzes it against all the information, the security technologies that you've got integrated with SecureX. What's that? So once that finishes, it will tell us which integration SecureX pulled information from.
And let me just explain. So, from an architecture perspective, right, what we're seeing here is a couple of components, right? So a SIEM, which is QRadar, continuously analysing data, log data, or network traffic to understand when something bad happens, right? And Cisco is connected to it, as are a bunch of other sources, right? The SOC analyst sits there with QRadar or whatever their interface is and goes, okay, I need to investigate this. I need to hunt down the problem, right? And they go to the console that was shown there, the QRadar one, and go, oh, okay, bad IP address, Cisco tells me that, I might go and investigate. So that's where the pivot happened there, the right click to go to the Cisco piece and now going to, so you're drilling down into a more constrained environment to try to hunt where that activity is that kicked off the threat detection piece. Sorry, I didn't mean to, I just
Oh, can't you? Just not.
For the WebEx.
I that one over there. I'll project a bit over that way, shall I?
Maybe yes.
Now that we've started this investigation, what we can see is the icon with the blue the magnifying glass is the indicator that we've used to start our search. And we can see all the relationships to that device or that IP address, and that's come from a number of different sources. And what we can see from the modules that have provided this information is IBM X-Force has lent its intelligence to this investigation, and we can also see that Umbrella has lent intelligence to this investigation. When we go and then have a look at that device, we can see down in the investigation details verdicts and information provided by those platforms. So while it's a very simple process to go through and have a look at, when you start getting into more complex investigations inside threat response, we can start adding additional things that we find to that investigation to start expanding out what's happening in our network. And ultimately what we're looking for is to identify any hosts in our network that have had any kind of communication to those malicious destinations. And that will typically show up, I'm not going to go through it because it'll take too long to render, but what that will show up as targets. And they'll show up as purple icons in this dashboard. They'll either be devices on our network, such as laptops, things, mobile devices, or it will show up as networks in our environment, such as umbrella networks. And that will start to give us, as threat hunters, information to really dive into our investigation. So shorten that time to detection, bring that visibility together so that we can shorten the time to detection and minimize the impact to those threats in our network. So from there, I won't go into too much more because we're very short on time and I'm getting hungry. I know others here are hungry.
You can never have enough security.
Who has the pleasure of closing off?
Right. Thanks very much, guys. Okay, so we've got a Q&A here as well. So I'll invite all panelists to come up and take a seat. And for those online, just type your messages in and we'll start answering them. So there's also the, I know there was a lot of moving parts in that equation there, get everything working. If you've got any questions, and if you leave here today and you think, that's not supposed to ask that question, just give us a call. So you can do myself at Ingram Micro. You've got all the contacts there with Anthony, Chris and Brad from the IBM side, and we've got the Cisco partner guys here as well. So please reach out, ask us any questions you want, and then we'll be happy to get back to you. So I'm going to get the panelists to come up and take a seat.
We're going to get live questions. Who's going to ask some questions?
So we've got questions here in the room, or guys over there can read them out if they come through on the web.
Actually, we may have to move the seats up.
Just with the microphone, yeah.
Okay.
You guys, no, sit down, guys. You're fine, Grant. You're good. I'm standing.
Sure.
I'm going to be out of picture, but
We can
Are there any questions for anyone? Or any questions online?
What's for lunch? Or...
What are we eating?
these are comfy seats.
They are good seats, Grant. Thanks for bringing them up.
And I see you get free socks as well too. Yes.
Yeah. There you go.
Yes, sir.
IBM, see?
Thank you. My name is Carl. I'm from IBM. Question regarding how all of this is related maybe to the essential and critical infrastructure.
I would say the essential aid is probably a precursor. The reason I say that, there's lots of controls in there that are simply implement that that can be done today, right? Patching and MFA, and you know, there's a whole there's 8 of them obviously, but situational awareness is the next big thing, and it's becoming that because now content is capable of doing it. Cisco integrated products, you know, IBM as a SIEM, cloud providers like AWS and Microsoft will be talking about Sentinel. You know, the analytics is there to detect, to understand what's happening in the networks and to share that, right? So that's why the government, when it looks at the cyber strategy, they talk about situational awareness, because in order for us to be effective as a Western country, we want to share that elsewhere as well. So into the Five Eyes, you can't share threat intel if you don't know what's going on. So most of the banks and other mature organisations have been doing this for years, but the problem's different now with cloud. It's at a different scale. So, you know, the collaborative piece is really important across IBM, Microsoft, and Cisco, and whoever else you want to use, how to get all that work together. So that's kind of my view on that.
And if I could just jump in there too, our product Duo Security does 4 of the essential 8.
So does our cloud identity platform. Not patching, we don't do patching.
Have you guys looked at the ratio of how many customers are going to self-manage this type of work, and what room is left for MSPs and people like us that want to manage it for the customers?
We haven't done research for that, but their complexity is high, right? So, but there's also an expectation. So the question I've got is some workload won't be able to be consumed by things like Sentinel and AWS or whatever, CloudWatch or whatever. They'll focus on primarily their own use cases, but there'll be a whole bunch of workload that you'll need to understand what's happening, and that's going to have to be done at scale across the top tiers at least, and then as you go down size of organisations, we're seeing a lot of requests for this kind of content in government, critical infrastructure, APRA regulated industries, you know. So, you know, I don't think there's an easy answer to that, but the key is how do we make it lower cost at scale, and that's where some of the open standards or integrated solutions like Cisco will help to break. And a lot of people who've done this are doing it where there needs to be some disruption as well. The way they're doing it is based on heritage approaches. So in cloud, it's actually forcing a finance discussion around that as well. What's the most efficient way of doing it?
And if I could just add to that too, some of the MSPs that I deal with are saying, how do I automate, orchestrate things so that my level 3 techs aren't doing the basic things from first level support? So how do I automate that, make my level 3 techs more interested and happy because they're not doing some of the boring, more repetitive tasks? That's something that SecureX brings in terms of the orchestration and automation piece.
I'll also pass a comment too, just quickly, is that the implementations where our storage team has been involved has been around MSP type implementations as well. So I don't know it from an industry perspective, but I do know that people are out there doing it. So.
Separate to all of this, from a SDN, software defined networking perspective, a lot of clients, once they get it all implemented, they're happy to self-manage and look after it themselves. And so I'm just wondering if the same thing's going to happen.
I don't think so. I think this is a highly specialised domain with low skills. We're in a skills crisis, so any one of us could go and get a job and get paid whatever we wanted, probably. Because insecurity, there's such a skills crisis, so you can't get these people. So that drives the economy towards a managed security service. And the infrastructure partners who've been successful in storage and systems are now transitioned to provide security as a service, and they're being very successful. So I don't see that the skills crisis drives a lot of this problem. So if you've got highly technical, competent people who can run complex IT systems, then security detection response is an obvious place where you can make money out of security.
And clients have talked to us, they want a platform and they need to have the other components in the platform, which includes the security side as well. So, the more that you can package it up for them, because they're trying to reduce their skills every day, right? They don't want to have to know, how every product works in it. They just want to be able to use it. So, I know that from our infrastructure side, we're seeing more and more happening in that space.
And just to talk that point, so in the cases where organisations have taken over the management and they've had issues, suddenly the partners call back in very, very quickly when it all blows up.
At the end of the day, if you're running workloads for customers, you're going to have a responsibility for providing some assurance that it's clean anyway. So if you can invest in getting that up and running, have a team to do that, and then start selling it, you actually have you can increase trust in your own brand, but also then on-sell, partner with ecosystem-friendly people. Jay's got
too good. I've got a loaded question for you. So I can see how your data, your SIEM, and your infrastructure work together to create the best possible solution for the end customer. And in the room we have partners. How are we making it viable for partners to sell to the customers with these 3 packages that we have here?
Well, it depends on the way the ecosystem partner wants to provide the service, but it really is a SOC implementation, right? Customers who have Cisco in a bunch of places, they need to provide situational awareness because of a compliance driver, come to the partner to say, we need to do this. You package it up with QRadar with Cisco, and then you've got eyes on glass as a managed service to do detection in their environment. So that's the packaging from a persona perspective, but I think we've worked on a package with Ingram on a go-to-market approach.
And that's what we see from customers. You find it's like they have some skills and they don't have the rest. And they like these elements. They like the fact that they're all talking to one another. They're looking to partner ecosystem to come and talk to you. They won't have the skills, they know the hard skills. And they want to be, I've got 5 guys, they've got someone here with me doing it, you guys to come in and help us. They want to make that, and so they understand what they're doing. And there's others who just go, you know what, I don't want to do it. You do it. Thanks. Take care of that for me. I want the reports in the end. I want the data that I can use and knock yourself out there.
And just to add to Rod's point, so if you think about here in Australia, if you look at the ABS, Australian Bureau of Statistics, 98% of Australian businesses employ less than 100 users. So they're organisations that they can't get their head around security. That's why you start to see a really big growth in MSPs that are going out offering these services to make it easy and taking the pain away, because it's fragmented. They may have some of the MSPs that I've been with we may have 8 to 10 security vendors they're dealing with. They're struggling, so there's a real vendor consolidation now starting to happen because they just cannot manage all the certifications, specializations, and knowledge updates in order to manage all these different security vendors. Does that answer your question?
One last thing. Just adding one last thing to that with SecureX, what we're starting to see, I work in enterprise in New South Wales, so I've got customers who are very much self-sufficient, but they still work with a lot of service providers to provide them that information. What we're starting to see with SecureX is they're now starting to talk to their service providers, say, can you build in SecureX this orchestration process for me? Can you build this dashboard for me? Because they just want the visibility. They want to be able to increase their threat protection time by using those orchestration and integrations. And that is with Cisco technology, that is with third-party technologies through these orchestrations. So being able to see something and then make an accurate decision by themselves. So I think there's a lot of money in an MSP solution just on doing that kind of work for customers, being that specialized skill set, because that's what the market doesn't have.
And the services.
And the services, yeah. I think services offering around that from a partner perspective is going to be key to making this a success.
24/7 with a partnership that can do help you do that, or this isn't a day job, right?
Correct.
So it's an ongoing thing. So you need people helping IT, just like any IT operations resiliency scenario.
And I think just to add to that point from a security perspective, so a lot of MSPs that have been doing managed desktop, that sort of stuff, and managed backup, disaster recovery, and everything else, that's been pretty much 5 by 7, 8 by 8 hour day session. Security's 24/7. You can have an outbreak at 2 a.m. in the morning. So this is what's tying back to is how do we really work on automation, orchestration, and really the ability to very quickly tie things down if something bad does happen.
Then Watson would no doubt help with that from an IBM perspective. That's the name I know. Does Cisco have an automation side as well? Because it seems like they will both talk to each other and both automate it from a protection standpoint, and that might reduce the impact on the MSP. Or am I going?
I mean, automation's built in for all of these tools. So the brands by which they apply it, and that's what some of the cloud native practices help with, right? Because we're now getting used to doing SDN and automating cloud workloads, resiliency, the whole thing. So security is following the same path. If you've got practices that adopt automated processes, then there's just different parts in the kill chain that you'd apply that using these platforms. So.
And to talk to your point, Cisco does have some machine learning. So we've got products like StealthWatch that's looking at anomalous flows. So we think about NetFlow and SFlow, JFlow and all that sort of thing. So we have the ability to look at, hang on, something anomalous has just happened because it now starts learning. Darren comes into work at a certain time each day. He's usually at home. We see him at home at this. Why is he suddenly logged in at 2 a.m. now from London? Well, that's probably not possible in terms of that. Suddenly 4 minutes later, he's now in Paris. Something serious has gone wrong. That's an alert. So that talks to machine learning and certainly artificial intelligence as well.
It does also have a number of integrations that correlate with those systems and that automated responses. It does come down to the company trusting those automated responses, but they are built into many of our integrations through SecureX. We can start automating a lot of that into third-party services.
Great, thanks.
Okay.
Time for some lunch, I think.
We're probably going to just finish up. Is there a final question?
There was one more question online from one of the webinar attendees, and it's to Anthony, and it's how do you think this solution will evolve as hackers get more sophisticated, and how does Cisco continue to evolve as Cisco is not a traditional security vendor? And then they've also asked the same question for IBM for Chris replacing the word Cisco.
Look, that's a good question. I'd love to help change your mind about Cisco being a security company. We have 5,000 employees now within the global security sales organisation. We're actually one of the largest security vendors, and certainly our Talos research organisation is actually one of the largest researchers businesses outside of the US federal government. So we do have a very solid security business. Yes, we've come from a route switch and collaboration and DC heritage, what we're doing here is how do we just build security into everything? Because we're not just having a conversation here today about security as such, but also a secure WebEx collaboration process, a secure data center. So that's a key thing as well. And to talk to the second point around hackers, look, you know, we are up against adversaries from around the world. We all read the papers and we see the different threat actors. You know, it's not necessary. SolarWinds, you know, look at Microsoft.
SolarWinds 1, 2, 3.
Look at some of the issues that Microsoft has had around Exchange. You know, so the reality is it only takes one person in an organisation to either click on a link or click on an attachment or do something silly that can jeopardise the entire organisation. One person. So what we've got to tie the conversation to is hackers are here, and I think my 21-year-old son, who's now doing software engineering at the University of New South Wales, is probably going to be one of these. But this is the reality. So we've got to keep on building tools and things and processes that A, educate your staff, B, how do we also automate if something bad does happen, and C, if something bad does really happen, how do we quickly identify and shut it down? The reality is hackers are here. And the problem is most people are struggling even patching today. So if you think about the first key piece in the ASD8, Australian Signals Directorate, is patching. Do you think anyone's keeping up to date with patching today? Everyone's struggling. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, IBM's made 20 acquisitions since 2000. We're at 9,000 employees. We generate $3-point-something billion in revenue every year in security. There are a lot of niche security vendors, but there's no one of the size and capability of these companies. We're just sitting under brands that have much higher missions, but right in underneath it, the advantage it gives us is that we can follow those local strategies, and whether it's data, AI, multi-cloud, hybrid, we're operating in the biggest clients around the world and delivering security as a workload management problem. And so, often we're not seen as a pure play security company, but how many of those are staying around as they are today without being broken up and consumed as well? So we're here to stay. Workloads need to be secure in the long term. It's just an essential part of running IT. So I guess put your faith in big companies as well in delivering their solutions. I think with that, another question.
I just want to say something. You can never have enough cybersecurity.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a good slogan. And let me just say, everything starts with a conversation as well. And the whole purpose of this was just to start the conversation. There's a whole series of experts here that you can bring in to talk to your clients as well at any point in time. So please do that as well.
Thanks, everyone.
That was brilliant. Thanks, everybody. Everybody in the room, there's lunch down there. Thanks for everybody who joined us on the web as well. And like we said, if you've got any questions, just ask. Thanks very much.